So one of the most important things in the economist is understanding incentives, okay? And I understood that early. And in our rooming house at Harvard, it turned out that each person, when they assigned rooms, got to pull one number out of the urn, okay? And they used a rule that the highest number of the entire rooming group was the order in which you picked. Okay, so it's obvious when you know that, is you want to have the biggest possible group, right? So even though there are really only 4 of us that wanted to live together, I convinced my roommates to group up with like 18 guys. Okay, so of course we had 18 draws out of 120 numbers. We were maybe like the second or third rooming group. So we had 18 people, so we got to pick 5 rooms, but we got to pick 5 rooms all right at the top. So that's all fine. That's a good use of economics. That's gaming the system. The problem was once you have 18 guys and you got to divide up into rooms, it's a really thorny problem because different people want to live with different folks. And we didn't have an easy way. We just couldn't solve the sorting problem of how to put 18 guys into 4 different rooms. So I said, look, this is obvious. I'm going to build a computer program, and each guy is going to get 100 points to assign. He can assign those across any of the other 17 roommates he wants. And in addition to that, there's going to be, for 2 people, you can put like -20 that won't come out of your 100. Okay? And what I'll do is I'll then have all the ratings, and I'll use a computer program that maximizes the joint utility, subject to the constraint that we're going to have 18 guys spread across, 4 rooms, 3 of 4 and 1 of 6. And I said, everyone's worried about it being secret. I said, I'm going to destroy the data at the end, so no one will see it. It'll run it, it'll say the answer, destroy it. Okay, so I ran this program, and it actually worked. Everything.
I was just going to say, better make sure it works before you throw away the data.
Yes. Okay, so it actually worked. I can't believe I actually got the 18 guys trusted me enough to go in and type all their data, and I looked at the answers, and I knew instantaneously I had made a terrible mistake, because basically what it did is it took the 4 guys that nobody liked, who actually hated each other worse than anyone else did, and everyone kind of knew that, and it put those 4 guys in the one place. And it put the 6 guys who really everybody liked, they got put together, and then there was the other mix. And as soon as I saw it, I knew exactly what had happened, and I knew it was a terrible solution, and I knew that as soon as people saw it, everyone's feelings were going to be hurt. So I simply turned off the computer and said, sorry guys, it crashed. I don't know what happened. I lost all the data. But it was actually pretty smart. It was one of the smarter things I did, because many non-economists would have fallen prey to the sunk cost fallacy, which is I had spent days programming this thing. Everyone typed in the data, and even though knowing the answer was a disaster, I would have stuck with it. But it was really interesting because I had that immediate insight, which is, damn, I thought through everything I thought. But there's always a case when you start messing with public policy or prediction where as soon as it happens, like, ooh, God, there's that one thing I didn't think about, which is obvious, right? It's obvious.
After the fact, it's obvious.
If everybody hates 4 guys, you got to put them together because it's the least costly way. So in my life, I was analytical. But I'm not saying I wasn't analytical in class. I mean, I was a fabulous...
So if you had to redo that exercise, what would you do?
It's hard, because you really, somehow you got to give maybe some minimum utility to each guy or something like that. But one thing you eventually learn as you learn about economics, that interpersonal utility comparisons are a really thorny way to go. And these sorting problems, I don't know, what would you do?
I think you do have to come up with some, some pricing system. I think, and one of the problems is obviously, do you really want to allow explicit prices where you actually allow people to bring money into the equation? But if you don't, I think you started in the right place, thinking about, well, I'm going to give people a budget, I'm going to let them spend their budget, and although I'm not so convinced the solution you came up with is such a terrible one.
No, I think it was efficient. Exactly, it was efficient, but when we go, I know you want to talk later about what economists have to learn from the real world, and I think this was an example for me where I could tell already from having listened to the discussions that efficiency alone wasn't going to solve this problem, because these guys, there was an incentive compatibility constraint here. These guys absolutely these four guys would kill each other if they lived together, and we all knew they couldn't live
Yeah,
together.
I mean, I think the other side of it, though, is you had this inherently linear model
Yeah.
where it was, you know, you didn't take account of the other side of the economics, which is if I live with four people and there's two guys I like and one guy I don't like, well, I don't have to deal with everybody
That's
equally,
true, yeah.
right? And you know, the poor guys in that one room had nobody that they could deal with,
Yeah.
right? And so no matter how they allocated their time,
Yep.
they weren't going to have a good time.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you would have to build into your algorithm to recognize there are slots in every room, and maybe having three other bad guys to live with is a disaster, much worse than having one
Yeah.
guy you don't want to live with in each room.
Yeah, really good point.
You know, and let alone the feedback effects that happen between, if I don't like you and you don't like me, that's could be a total disaster. It's probably efficient in a very narrow sense, but probably not in that broader sense of taking account of the kind of endogenous allocation of time,
Yeah.
we would say in economics. The
Right.
fact that I don't have to deal with everybody equally, and having some good options can be valuable in and of itself. I think that's a good. So how did you guys allocate them then?
We had an all-night session of going back and forth, and
Well, why didn't you appoint captains and do like we used to pick baseball teams or whatever? You know, you had four captains, the room captains. You know, take the guys who scored the highest on your list, make them room captains, and say, okay, those four room captains are going to pick. I might have gone with the captain approach, you know.
yeah, especially I think because I think what's always tough about the captain approach is the last two guys are standing there, the last one you pick feel bad, but in this setting you could actually do it all privately, right?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
could have the captain, the three captains in the room, or the four captains in the room, nobody else.
Yeah.
But even figuring out who the four captains would be is
Yeah.
a tough problem. Well, we made it work. I think in the end what happened was some of the more popular people just said, hey, look, this is who we're living with. You guys got to deal with it. You got to deal with it.
That's
there's
kind of
a
how the
certain
market
amount of-
deals with it, you know.
There's a certain amount of power for people. I don't know at that point if we really, I think we couldn't really walk away. I mean, I think we had already committed to being in this group, so I'm not sure what the default was if we simply couldn't agree.
But I guess I'm already seeing Steve Levitt kind of in these early days, right? I mean, you're an economist, you think like an economist, but on the other hand, you don't see economics as kind of living inside this classroom or living inside this
Yeah.
box. So that's why I challenged the notion that you weren't analytical. And you mentioned analytical in the sense of doing options and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's another dimension, which is, were you analytical in terms of how you organize the world around you? That is, thought about, well, geez, why is the world look the way it does? Why do I see? Can I understand how things work?